But
Yeah. Okay.
there we go. Oh, we're rolling. We're rolling. So first of all, Steve, how did you first get into football? Where was the first sort of memory that got you into Cardiff City and football itself?
That's actually a really nice story because my dad used to work for Thomas Cook's the travel agents, and used to get back and forth to work on a little Pooch 50. So when I was a kid, I think I must have been about either 7 or 8, which would be in the mid to late 60s. My dad used to take me to watch Cardiff City on the back with Pooch 50, and we'd have on the back of the bike there'd be one of my mum's old kind of sewing boxes, and in the box would be an orange, the South Wales Echo, and a flask of tea.
Yeah.
And so at half time then we'd have a look at the latest news on the club. Yeah, and those and we used to park up a lane there was a pub there at the time that was called the Ninian, I think it's gone now. And my dad always parked up this lane, and he parked his bike there. I thought, oh, my dad must have loads of mates. And I didn't realise till years later he was actually paying the guy. There were loads of other bikes in the garden as well. You know? But yeah, so my memories revolve about, like a lot of people, revolve around fantastic times with my dad.
Yeah. Who was the sort of first player? Because my dad actually started going to Cardiff similar time as that as well, because he was around there. He always mentions John Toshak as the player he first fell in love with in a City shirt. Was it a similar story for you?
Yeah, Toshak would obviously, would be right up there. They were that team. Of course, that was around the time heading into the famous Real Madrid victory. People like Brian Clark and Don Murray and Gary Bell and these kind of people. Funny enough, I'm still in touch with Gary Bell these days, and Brian Clark, God bless him, was an absolute gentleman who sadly died a few years ago. But Toshak would have been right up there, and it was a ludicrous fee, even in its time, £110,000. And look at the career he went on to have, and who he went on to manage. But there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. So when did it first sort of come to light that you would be able to create content around Cardiff City?
Well, what actually happened, again, it's another quite good story. It's 20 years ago. Because we're heading towards the 20th anniversary of when Andy Campbell got that winner against QPR to take us into the Championship. And in the winter before that, which is now over 20 years ago, there was a phone-in on Real. There was a show on Real Radio. It's kind of phone-in, with a guy called Keith Cooper, former Premiership referee, and other guests on the show. Real Radio stopped the show, so Keith became available, and at the same time, coverage. They dropped the coverage of Swansea and Cardiff City at the same time. So all of a sudden, there was kind of a gap in the market, and for people to phone in and talk about, in our case, particularly Cardiff City. So I contacted Keith Cooper. In fact, the Vince Alm, who you might know, Cardiff City Sports Club, contacted me. They were looking for a station. We were looking for content. Keith Cooper came in, we sat down, we had a conversation, and it was launched then. And at that time, just going out on GTFM, which is the first ever community radio station in Wales. We're now going out 3 community radio stations and online.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it was originally recorded here.
But when we were at Treforest.
Treforest, yeah.
So when we were at Treforest, because it was part of it's also 20 years since the launch of GTFM Radio, which is the first community radio station in Wales. So university helped to launch that. That's part of my initial job when I came in. So I had to set up kind of specialist programs, and one of the ones that I created was the Cardiff City Phone In. And then when we came to Cardiff, we had to find a way of sharing it on other platforms. So we used a kind of digital system which allowed you to go out on Radio Cardiff. It's Cardiff City after all. Bro Radio, Barry and the Vale, Little Morgan. At one stage it was going out, I think, on 4 different FM stations live from the studios here at the atrium.
Yeah, so what are your sort of fondest memories of doing the phone-in? Well, firstly in the content, and secondly on the field.
Well, I mean, memories on the field that would spring to mind for any Cardiff City fan. Obviously, they'd be, getting into the Premiership for, with the Visitors' Day Pass on 2 occasions, and getting to FA Cup finals, League Cup finals, etc. has obviously been fantastic. But I think it kind of transcends on and off the field. My best memories of the phone-in have been when, in different times, because things have changed so much in 20 years, the whole nature of phone-ins have changed. But at that time we used to have all the players on, We had the management on, we had Sam Hammam, we had Peter Ridsdale, we had all the players, we had Dave Jones, we had old Lenny, of course, Lenny Lawrence. Anyone connected with the club used to come in. One time we had Frank Skinner on the show. Now these were contacts of Keith Cooper, because Keith Cooper was well connected in professional sport as a former kind of Premiership and international referee. But it's actually sitting there with players you admire and just chatting to them and giving them a cup of tea and finding out they're actually human beings, and they're the memories which are quite special. But you can't do it the same way these days, because football clubs, for whatever reason, including Cardiff City, are just so paranoid about letting their players speak and social media shareability, and the whole nature of the thing has changed, which is sad, really.
Yeah, in terms of the phone-in, obviously the pandemic must have had an impact on that, and you guys now do most of it remotely. So how have you found the transition from in-person to remote?
That's a really good question. We used to have a beautiful radio studio here at the university, which is about half the size of this room. It was a big old studio. But they now use it for live streaming, and they use it for technical demonstrations. So it's not available to us anymore. But when we had that, we were able to get opportunities for students. Somebody could be the producer, sitting in the kind of production hub. They could have talk back to the presenters. They could say, so-and-so's on the line calling about this, that and the other. We were taking calls on 3 different phones on a dedicated number. But all of that has kind of gone. And I do miss that to a large extent, because I love radio, that's my thing. But then and I'd also never done any visual content. When lockdown came along, I wouldn't say I've reinvented myself, but I'm way more comfortable now in front of a camera than I've ever been before. And to the extent I don't really think about the camera anymore. Whereas for years, I'd never thought about a microphone, and now I can say the same thing with a camera. So the interaction now is, the live interaction is on the Facebook live stream, which we do via Zoom, so you get the text messages coming in. Luckily, one of my co-presenters runs a firm of solicitors, so he's able to have a weather eye on the comments before we take them live, and then if there's anything really dodgy in the text, we can remove them, edit them out at the end, but then it's then shared with 3 different FM radio stations. But live in a studio, for me, can never be beaten.
It's certainly an intriguing one, and you've said you've developed and evolved throughout the years. What's the next evolution for the Cardiff City Phone In?
Well, you'd hope that at some point there might be a new sponsor who wants to come in. You'd hope that this is, speaking as a Cardiff City supporter, fantasy dreamland stuff at the moment. You'd hope we might be able to push at the right end of the table and maybe get back into the Premiership again. And if we do, then you've got a capital city club from Wales with a huge fan base, not just in Cardiff, but as you know, in the valleys and Barry and all over the place, which is why the stations were relevant. And then that becomes a really viable sponsorship opportunity for somebody to get behind. But the reason, my driving force for over the 20 years has always been the same, really. It's twofold. One is it's by the fans, for the fans. It's only ever been there to support Cardiff City Football Club. In fact, at one time we had the Supporters Club where we're sponsoring the show. We used to have a fantastic relationship with the club. I've recently contacted the club again to ask them to be involved, and again I've received no response. Nobody was available to return my email. It's that, but it's also ideally by what I would say cross-platforming and syndicating programme and content across various community radio stations, which gives you a potential audience, across the whole of South Wales of 500,000 plus people. That you also, by doing that, if you can get sponsors on board, you can bring revenue back in to the community radio stations, who are charitable, non-profit making third sector agencies, to provide an alternative voice for their communities in Wales.
That's perfect. I think that should be all good.